The courtroom was a theater of tension, every eye fixed on the two figures at the center. Justice Samuel Alito sat with the weight of decades of authority behind him, his gaze sharp, commanding, unyielding. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett stood, poised, her presence calm but unmistakably commanding. The gavel struck, echoing like a heartbeat through the room, and the murmurs of anticipation swelled as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Alito leaned forward, his voice cutting through the hush. "Ms. Crockett," he began, each word deliberate, "how do you justify advocating for policies that, frankly, seem untested, unrealistic, and potentially harmful to the very people you claim to serve?" The courtroom gasped collectively, the weight of the question landing like a physical blow. Cameras zoomed in on Crockett's face, capturing the subtle narrowing of her eyes, the slight tilt of her head, the quiet intelligence that suggested she had been ready for this moment all along. The audience reacted instinctively. Journalists froze mid-note. Spectators shifted in their seats. Whispers rose like a rising tide. The air was thick with anticipation, as if everyone present sensed they were about to witness something extraordinary. Alito's reputation for sharp questioning was legendary, but this line had the sting of accusation, the undertone of challenge, designed to unsettle even the most composed advocate. Crockett inhaled, allowing a fraction of a second to stretch, long enough for every eye in the room to lock onto her. Her calm was a stark contrast to Alito's piercing intensity, a quiet force radiating authority and purpose. There was no flinch, no hesitation, just the presence of someone who had faced scrutiny before, someone whose conviction was grounded in preparation, principle, and courage. Every camera flash, every shifting weight in the audience amplified the drama. The courtroom, a room built on decorum and tradition, had become the stage for a clash of intellect and integrity versus experience and intimidation. The first words had been spoken, but the real story, the confrontation that would ripple across social media, newsrooms, and public consciousness, was only beginning. But no one expected how Crockett would respond to leave everyone stunned. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It had transformed into a battleground for principles that extended far beyond the room's polished wood and muted walls. Every glance, every note taken, every microphone trained on the proceedings carried with it the weight of public scrutiny. This was a test of justice itself, a moment that would reverberate far beyond the bench, reaching into homes, offices, and devices across the nation. Crockett understood this. She wasn't just defending a position or a policy. She was defending the very idea that integrity and courage could prevail in the face of authority. At stake were fundamental questions: whose rights truly mattered, how accountability would be enforced, and what standards of fairness the law would uphold when confronted with bold, new perspectives. Alito's reputation for rigor made the courtroom a crucible, where every word mattered, every hesitation could be amplified, and every misstep could be turned into fodder for critics. For the viewers, both in the room and across social platforms, this wasn't just a legal debate, it was a test of character, a measure of who could rise above the theatrics and speak truth with precision and dignity. Crockett's composure became the focal point. Her posture, the steady cadence of her breathing, the quiet intensity in her eyes, all communicated a confidence born of preparation and principle. She wasn't rattled by Alito's piercing questions or the murmurs of doubt that rippled through the courtroom. Instead, she embodied moral clarity, a reminder that courage under pressure doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands unshaken, inviting the world to bear witness. The audience could feel it, even through the grainy screens of live streams and television coverage. This was a confrontation that demanded respect, not spectacle. As Alito launched into a series of increasingly pointed inquiries, the tension ratcheted higher. Each question was a test of her reasoning, her ability to anticipate challenges, and her capacity to articulate principles that were both legally sound and ethically compelling. Observers began to realize that this exchange wasn't just about law. It was about leadership, accountability, and the kind of moral courage that could inspire millions to engage, to reflect, and to act. Every pause she took, every careful word she selected, signaled to the courtroom and the nation that she was fully aware of the stakes and fully capable of meeting them. The energy in the room became palpable, electric. Journalists leaned forward, fingers hovering over keyboards, sensing the viral potential of every phrase. Spectators whispered, their voices rising and falling in awe, wondering who would emerge with the upper hand. Outside, social media began to stir. Early clips sparked curiosity, shares, and speculation. The tension wasn't just contained in the courtroom. It was spilling into homes, offices, and news feeds, compelling everyone watching to ask the same question. What would happen next? Every element of the scene, the poised lawyer, the legendary jurist, the silent audience, the cameras capturing every subtle shift, was aligned for a moment that would define perception. Crockett's clarity, calm, and courage made it clear that the impending reply would not be ordinary. It was the kind of statement that could reshape narratives, shift momentum, and leave a mark on both law and culture. And as Alito prepared his next line of questioning, no one could predict the reply that would shock the room. Justice Samuel Alito was a figure whose reputation preceded him. Decades on the bench had earned him a name synonymous with precision, intellect, and an almost unyielding adherence to the law as he interpreted it. His career was studded with landmark decisions, some celebrated for their clarity, others criticized for their perceived rigidity. Colleagues described him as a formidable presence, one whose courtroom was not just a space for hearing arguments, but a stage where authority, expectation, and scrutiny were constant companions. Stories of Alito's exacting standards circulated widely. Young attorneys often recounted the fear and awe they felt stepping into his courtroom for the first time. One remembered being grilled over a minor procedural point, every word dissected, every pause scrutinized, until the attorney's confidence wavered under the weight of the bench's gaze. Another spoke of a rising legal star who attempted to present a novel argument, only to be met with a calm, cutting question that left them scrambling, their reasoning exposed to the silent but sharply critical courtroom. These anecdotes painted a man of intellect and discipline, but also a man whose authority could feel like a wall, insurmountable and intimidating. Alito's style was not born of cruelty, but of exacting standards. He demanded precision, expecting lawyers to anticipate every angle, every precedent, every counter-argument. His questions often carried a subtle sting, phrased with impeccable formality, yet charged with an undercurrent of challenge. In interviews, he acknowledged the necessity of rigor. The law is not a forum for half measures, he had said. It demands clarity, accountability, and depth. Anything less does a disservice to justice itself. And so, each courtroom appearance was a performance of intellect, where his reputation as an interrogator of formidable skill was reaffirmed, time and again. Yet for all his experience, Alito's encounters with those of unwavering moral clarity had occasionally exposed cracks in the perception of his authority. There were moments when a young advocate, armed with preparation, poise, and ethical conviction, could navigate his questioning with such grace that it reshaped the courtroom dynamic. Still, such occurrences were rare, and many assumed that very few could match his precision, much less withstand the intensity of his scrutiny without faltering. In public perception, Alito embodied the archetype of the stern, unflinching authority figure, a person whose gravitas was amplified by decades of service, whose questions could unsettle the unprepared, and whose intellect demanded deference. Yet within that image, there existed the subtle vulnerability that comes with a singular focus on procedure and technical mastery. He excelled at testing knowledge, but moral clarity and composure under pressure were variables far harder to control. As the courtroom prepared for the confrontation with Jasmine Crockett, the weight of Alito's reputation hung in the air like an invisible barrier. Everyone knew his history, the lawyers he had humbled, the moments of public scrutiny he had weathered, and the authority that commanded respect. But what they could not know, what Alito himself could not anticipate, was how Crockett's blend of preparation, calm, and principle would intersect with his formidable style. Here was someone who had faced challenges before, who had turned pressure into opportunity, and who carried an inner certainty that no barrage of questioning could easily dismantle. The contrast between the two was already apparent in the quiet moments before the gavel struck. Alito, with decades of experience, his sharp questions ready to probe, his authority felt in every measured glance. Crockett, poised and deliberate, exuding confidence not from intimidation, but from mastery of facts, ethics, and strategy. The tension was cinematic, every observer aware that this confrontation was about more than argument. It was about principle versus precedent, courage versus authority, and poise versus pressure. But Crockett's story, her preparation, poise, and principles, was something Alito could never anticipate. Jasmine Crockett's journey to the courtroom was forged in the fires of perseverance and principle. Born into a family that valued education and hard work above all, she learned early the meaning of responsibility and sacrifice. Her parents instilled a sense of justice in her that went beyond textbooks or classroom lessons. Justice, they taught, was about standing for what was right even when no one was watching, about using one's voice to uplift others who could not speak for themselves. From her earliest days, Crockett carried that lesson as both shield and compass. Her adolescence was marked by challenges that demanded resilience. Navigating schools with limited resources, facing systemic inequalities, and confronting societal expectations, she developed a discipline and focus that would later become her trademark. Every setback became a stepping stone, every obstacle a test of resolve. It was in these moments, grappling with real-world inequities, that Crockett began to cultivate the moral clarity that would define her professional life. She learned to listen intently, to analyze critically, and to respond with precision, a combination that would serve her well when the stakes were highest. Crockett's path to law was intentional. She recognized early that legal expertise could be a tool for change, a way to challenge structures that marginalized communities and perpetuated injustice. Law school was more than an academic endeavor. It was a proving ground. She excelled not merely because of intellect, but because of a relentless work ethic and a capacity for empathy. Moot court competitions, late-night case preparations, and debates with seasoned professors honed her ability to articulate complex ideas with clarity and conviction. Each experience reinforced her understanding that knowledge alone was insufficient. Integrity, courage, and poise were equally essential. Early in her career, Crockett faced situations that tested both skill and principle. In one high-profile case, she confronted a powerful corporation whose legal team relied on intimidation and procedural tricks to obscure accountability. While many young attorneys might have faltered, Crockett approached the case with meticulous preparation, anticipating every argument, identifying every weakness in the opposition's logic, and presenting her case with a calm authority that left judges and peers alike impressed. Her arguments were precise, her tone measured, her reasoning unassailable. The courtroom became a stage where intelligence and ethical clarity met pressure and scrutiny, and Crockett emerged not only victorious but respected for the manner in which she achieved it. Her reputation grew steadily, built on victories that combined intellect, moral courage, and unwavering composure. In legislative hearings, she confronted political figures who attempted to derail her focus, redirect debates, or cast doubt on her credibility. Yet time and again, Crockett's calm confidence allowed her to redirect conversations toward substance, to answer challenges without being baited, and to leave opponents visibly unsettled by her measured authority. These experiences became the foundation of her courtroom presence, teaching her the delicate balance between firmness and grace, confrontation and persuasion. Beyond professional achievements, Crockett's life was marked by an enduring commitment to service. She volunteered, mentored young advocates, and engaged directly with communities often overlooked by policy discussions. This connection to the people she represented gave her arguments depth and resonance. When she spoke, it was never abstract. It was personal, grounded in the lived realities of those whose voices she carried forward. The audience watching her knew that she fought not just for law's sake, but for justice, fairness, and the dignity of individuals whose struggles mirrored her own. Crockett's combination of preparation, principle, and presence made her formidable. In the courtroom, it was not merely what she said, but how she carried herself, the calm in her voice, the certainty in her gestures, the unwavering gaze that signaled she was neither intimidated nor distracted. This aura of quiet authority drew admiration, commanding attention and respect without the need for theatrics. Observers could see that Crockett's victories were not lucky. They were earned, grounded in resilience, discipline, and ethical clarity. Every encounter she faced, every challenge she overcame, contributed to a persona that no intimidation could shake. Her past was a testament to triumph under pressure, a narrative of skill matched with integrity, intellect tempered by empathy, and courage guided by principle. The courtroom stage was familiar territory. She thrived in high-stakes environments because she had trained herself to respond thoughtfully, act decisively, and maintain composure when others might falter. And now, facing one of the most formidable legal minds in the country, Crockett was ready to show why she could not be rattled. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, thick enough to feel on every seat, every camera, every whispered observation. Alito's questions came sharp and deliberate, each one a precise probe designed to unsettle, to test, to expose weakness. "Ms. Crockett," he began, voice steady but carrying the weight of decades of authority, "how do you reconcile advocating for policy measures that, by conventional analysis, carry significant legal and societal risk?" The question hung in the air, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, every eye tracked Crockett's reaction. There was no tremor, no hesitation, only a subtle intake of breath as she considered the layers beneath the surface. Then she replied, her tone even, her cadence measured. "Your Honor, when policies are designed to expand rights and protect the most vulnerable, risk is not in advocacy. It is in ignoring inequity and failing to act." The courtroom murmured. Alito's sharp gaze narrowed slightly, intrigued but unyielding. Alito pressed further, escalating the pressure. He posed hypotheticals with precision, each scenario crafted to corner Crockett, to force a misstep. What if such measures unintentionally disadvantage certain groups or conflict with existing precedents? How do you justify proceeding despite those potential consequences? The intensity was building. His questions were no longer mere inquiries. They were challenges, tests of intellect, morality, and resilience. Crockett's responses remained composed. Each answer was deliberate, layered with logic, grounded in law and ethical principle. She navigated hypotheticals with an ease that belied the pressure, turning the courtroom's focus from confrontation to clarity. Every pause she allowed before speaking amplified her presence. Every well-chosen word reminded the audience that preparation and principle could stand unshaken, even under the fiercest scrutiny. The cinematic tension escalated. Close-ups captured the shifting expressions of the audience. Journalists leaning forward, pens hovering over notebooks, eyes wide. Spectators exchanging subtle glances, murmurs rising like ripples across the room. Judges scribbled notes, pens pausing mid-air, caught between fascination and disbelief. Even Alito, for all his experience, showed the slightest signs of recalibration, adjusting his tone and timing in response to Crockett's unwavering poise. Questions turned sharper, hypotheticals more intricate. Alito introduced scenarios that demanded not only legal precision, but moral clarity. Yet Crockett responded with a steady authority, each answer a blend of intellect, ethics, and practicality. The dynamic shifted subtly. The intensity of Alito's interrogation began to highlight, rather than obscure, Crockett's competence and insight. Where others might have faltered, she projected clarity, confidence, and a calm that seemed almost magnetic, drawing attention to the substance of her argument, while deflecting any attempt to rattle her. The courtroom's energy became electric. Every pause, every measured breath, every thoughtful nod carried weight. The audience could sense that something extraordinary was unfolding, a confrontation not merely of law and policy, but of character and principle. The usual rhythm of questioning and response had transformed into a suspenseful interplay, each exchange layered with the potential for revelation, each silence pregnant with anticipation. Alito's intensity reached its peak, the questions now rapid-fire, designed to corner and provoke. Yet Crockett remained unshaken, answering with precision, integrity, and clarity, her voice calm against the storm of interrogation. Observers began to realize that this was no ordinary courtroom performance. It was a display of moral and intellectual fortitude that could not be diminished by authority or aggression. And then, in a moment that would echo beyond the courtroom, Crockett struck back. Crockett took a breath, her gaze sweeping the courtroom with quiet intensity. The murmurs faded as if the room collectively realized the moment had arrived. Every eye fixed on her, not out of intimidation but anticipation. She began, her tone steady, deliberate, measured. "Your Honor, when evaluating the potential impact of policies, we must look not only at precedent but at the human consequences of inaction." A hush settled over the courtroom, punctuated only by the soft shuffle of papers and the quiet scratch of pens. Crockett continued, laying out facts with precision, her words carefully balancing legal rigor with moral clarity. "Ignoring inequity does not preserve tradition. It perpetuates harm. When we choose inaction, we are complicit in the consequences faced by those whose rights and dignity we are sworn to protect." She paused, allowing the weight of her statement to settle. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room, the sound almost audible. Alito's expression tightened, his brows knitting as he processed her reasoning. The silence was not a void. It was a crucible, each word Crockett spoke forging clarity where tension had reigned. She shifted seamlessly into addressing the hypotheticals he had raised, dissecting each scenario with calm precision, exposing assumptions and reinforcing her points with citations, precedents, and empirical evidence. Every answer was layered, structured, and resonant, not merely a response but a lesson in legal and ethical reasoning. Audience reactions intensified. A journalist in the back leaned forward, pen poised over notebook, realizing that the words she was capturing would make headlines. Another whispered, "She's not just answering questions, she's redefining the narrative." Cameras panned across faces, judges nodding subtly, spectators holding their breath, reporters capturing the intensity of the moment. Even Alito, formidable as ever, hesitated, his calculated composure flickering for an instant, a subtle but telling acknowledgement of the force she had unleashed. Crockett's pace was deliberate. Each pause was strategic, giving her words room to resonate, giving the courtroom a chance to absorb the logic and principle intertwined in her answers. Her composure contrasted sharply with the intensity of Alito's earlier questioning. Whereas his voice had carried authority, hers carried inevitability. Every argument she made was anchored in preparation, every assertion underscored by integrity. The juxtaposition was cinematic, a battle not of volume or aggression, but of clarity and conviction. As she spoke, the room seemed to contract around her, the tension so palpable it could almost be felt in the air. Judges scribbled notes with deliberate care. Spectators leaned forward, murmurs barely contained, capturing the moment in whispers that spread like wildfire. Every phrase she uttered felt like a calculated strike, dismantling assumptions and reframing the debate. The narrative was no longer about confrontation. It was about insight, justice, and reason. Social media erupted mid-exchange. Early clips of Crockett's words were shared instantly, trending hashtags forming before the gavel even struck again. "You your Crockett clapback," "Courtroom dominance," "You mic drop moment," and "Justice served" began to circulate, viewers across the country replaying the video in disbelief and awe. Online, commentators debated the implications. Ordinary citizens shared clips with captions like, "Watch how courage meets intellect," and "She just dismantled decades of courtroom intimidation in one answer." The debate transcended the courtroom, entering living rooms, feeds, and conversations nationwide. Alito attempted a follow-up, but the momentum had shifted. His questions, precise and historically intimidating, met with calculated counters that blended law, ethics, and real-world consequence. Crockett anticipated each line, addressing it without faltering, exposing gaps in assumptions and grounding her reasoning in principle. The courtroom became a tableau of contrast. Alito's experience, formidable yet reactive, facing Crockett's calm, prepared, and unstoppable clarity. Audience reactions became almost tactile in their intensity. Whispers turned to audible gasps. Pens hovered midair, Camera lenses captured subtle shifts in expressions: surprise, admiration, a grudging respect. Crockett's reply was not just heard. It was felt, echoing in the collective consciousness of everyone present. The power of measured words, grounded in preparation and principle, became impossible to ignore. The climax approached as Crockett summarized her stance, each sentence a crescendo of reason and moral authority. To uphold justice, we must act with clarity, courage, and conscience. Not tomorrow, not when convenient. Now. For those whose lives depend on the integrity of our decisions, our responsibility is absolute. And that responsibility is one I embrace without hesitation. The courtroom exhaled collectively, the intensity of anticipation giving way to stunned silence, the words reverberating far beyond the walls of the room. As cameras panned, commentators whispered disbelief off-screen. Social media feeds exploded. Clips looped endlessly. Hashtags climbed, reactions flooded in from viewers inspired by the calm authority and moral clarity she displayed. Even critics found themselves pausing, recognizing the force of intellect and ethics meeting intimidation head-on. The courtroom had become a symbol. The power of reason, preparation, and integrity could prevail against the weight of authority. Alito's visage reflected a momentary shift, a pause that betrayed recognition of Crockett's mastery. The exchanges had been designed to unsettle, to challenge, to push limits, but every attempt had been met with measured clarity. Every trap navigated with skill and principle. Crockett had not only answered the questions, she had reframed the conversation entirely, asserting moral and intellectual authority in a space traditionally dominated by experience and hierarchy. The energy in the room was electric, yet reverent. Each spectator understood they had witnessed something extraordinary, a demonstration of intellect, courage, and preparation in perfect harmony. Cameras, microphones, and silent observers captured the apex of a moment that would define the courtroom exchange for years to come. The courtroom fell silent, and then the nation exploded online. The courtroom had emptied, but the echoes of Crockett's reply reverberated far beyond its polished walls. Within minutes, clips of her composed, fact-driven response flooded social media platforms. Twitter feeds lit up with hashtags. Crockett clapped back, justice served, mic drop moment. Videos looped endlessly, shared by viewers captivated by her intelligence, poise, and moral authority. Instagram stories and TikTok reactions captured every pause, every carefully chosen phrase, and every stunned reaction from judges and spectators alike. The nation was watching, replaying, and talking. Commentators weighed in almost instantly. Legal analysts dissected her answers with reverence, noting how she navigated hypotheticals with clarity that even seasoned practitioners admired. Political journalists highlighted the audacity and preparation that made her responses not just correct, but resonant with ethical and societal significance. Every article, tweet, and post amplified the impact. Crockett had become the symbol of calm authority prevailing under intense pressure. Public opinion shifted in real time, as ordinary citizens marveled at the rare combination of intellect, preparation, and integrity displayed in a high-stakes environment. The ripple effect extended beyond social media. Donations to organizations and causes championed by Crockett began to spike, supporters inspired by her poise and advocacy eager to translate admiration into action. Her past work, often overlooked in the shadows of political maneuvering, suddenly received renewed attention, as voters and advocates recognized the depth of her commitment to justice, equality, and fairness. The courtroom exchange was no longer a moment. It was a movement. Politicians and public figures couldn't ignore it either. Colleagues praised her composure. Opponents begrudgingly acknowledged her skill. Media outlets replayed the moment repeatedly, commentators dissecting every inflection, pause, and phrase. Even those skeptical of her positions found themselves captivated by the sheer mastery of her response. The courtroom, once a confined stage, had become a national spectacle, a live demonstration that intellect and moral clarity could dominate under pressure. Unshaken by authority or intimidation, public reaction carried an emotional payoff that resonated deeply. Viewers didn't just admire Crockett for her legal acumen. They celebrated her as a figure of resilience and principle. In an era where confrontation often rewards volume over virtue, seeing composure, intelligence, and moral courage triumph was profoundly satisfying. It was a moment that reassured people that preparation, integrity, and calm confidence were forces capable of challenging entrenched authority and shifting narratives. News outlets began highlighting the viral nature of the moment, juxtaposing clips of Alito's piercing questioning with Crockett's poised, methodical responses. Experts commented on how rare it was to witness a rising legal mind not merely survive intense scrutiny, but emerge strengthened and validated. The exchange became a teaching moment, referenced in law schools, political forums, and civic discussions as an example of how clarity, preparation, and ethical reasoning could command respect in even the most intimidating arenas. The impact on Crockett's reputation was immediate and profound. She was no longer simply a capable attorney. She became a symbol of principled advocacy and unshakable confidence. Invitations for speaking engagements, interviews, and panels poured in. As organizations and institutions sought insight into how she prepared, how she maintained composure, and how she merged intellect with moral clarity, supporters felt validated, critics were forced to pause, and the public at large witnessed the extraordinary power of a prepared and principled response under scrutiny. Even days after the exchange, the courtroom moment continued to echo. Media cycles replayed the highlights. Social media trends lingered. Memes celebrating her calm authority spread with playful admiration. People everywhere shared clips with friends and colleagues, using the moment to spark discussions about justice, integrity, and the value of composure in high-pressure situations. It was a reminder that courage and preparation could create ripples far beyond the walls of a single courtroom. But the story wasn't over. This courtroom clash left lessons for everyone watching. As the gavel's echo faded and the courtroom began to empty, Jasmine Crockett remained composed, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. This was more than a legal victory, more than a well-structured argument. It was a statement of principle. Every glance from supporters, every nod of approval from colleagues, confirmed that her presence and poise had transcended the confines of the courtroom. She had demonstrated that integrity, preparation, and courage could outlast intimidation and authority. Crockett's victory was not measured in applause or headlines, but in the quiet recognition that standing firm under pressure transforms not only the immediate moment, but the culture around it. She reframed the confrontation for the audience, shifting focus from the tension of questioning to the enduring lesson embedded in her actions. Fear and aggression might seek to dominate, but truth, clarity, and ethical resolve hold a power that commands respect and creates lasting influence. Every step she took toward the courtroom exit carried symbolic weight. Supporters' eyes followed her with admiration. Soft murmurs of approval rippled through the gallery. The camera pans captured the interplay of light across the polished floors, the reflective surfaces catching glimpses of individuals whose expressions mirrored the inspiration they felt. The scene was cinematic, yet intimate, a reminder that courage is both personal and collective, that the strength of one prepared and principled individual can ignite conviction in countless others. Beyond legal theory, Crockett's message resonated with universal values. Her composure under scrutiny illustrated that preparation is a form of respect for oneself, for the institution, and for those whose interests one represents. Courage is not loud or reactive. It is deliberate, calculated, and anchored in moral certainty. Her example reminded viewers that service, whether to law, community, or society, is inseparable from integrity. To act ethically, to speak with clarity, and to uphold one's principles is a triumph that extends far beyond any courtroom victory. Audience reflection was immediate and visceral. Social media reactions transformed from celebration to introspection, with viewers discussing not only the technical brilliance of her responses, but the moral clarity they embodied. Commentators, journalists, and everyday citizens alike found inspiration in her example, drawing lessons about leadership, resilience, and the quiet power of preparation. This was a rare moment in which intellect and ethics converged seamlessly. offering a model of principled behavior that could be applied across personal and professional spheres alike. As Crockett walked from the bench, the subtle, triumphant rhythm of soft music seemed to underscore her passage, reinforcing the emotional uplift of the scene. Cameras caught every detail, the respectful nods from colleagues, the admiration etched on spectators' faces, the weightless confidence in her step. It was a visual affirmation of the idea that courage and integrity are enduring, that even when confronted by authority and intimidation, steadfast commitment to principle prevails. The lesson extended beyond the immediate courtroom drama. For viewers, it became a call to embrace preparation, to cultivate moral courage, and to confront challenges with both intellect and ethical conviction. Crockett's example served as a reminder that standing firm under scrutiny is not simply a personal triumph. It is a contribution to collective trust, to the ideals of justice, and to the demonstration that integrity matters in every domain of life. Because in the end, this was never just a courtroom exchange. It was a lesson in courage and truth. The courtroom may have emptied, but the impact of that exchange will linger far beyond the walls where it unfolded. Jasmine Crockett's poised, fact-driven, and morally grounded responses turned a moment of potential intimidation into a demonstration of courage and principle. She reminded the nation that preparation, integrity, and steadfastness can prevail, even when facing formidable authority. It was a confrontation that transcended law. It was a testament to what happens when intellect meets ethical conviction. This moment is a reminder to all of us. Standing firm under pressure matters. Whether in civic life, professional arenas, or everyday challenges, courage and preparation can transform fear into influence, uncertainty into respect, and confrontation into clarity. Crockett's example shows that one voice rooted in truth and principle has the power to shift narratives and inspire change. If this courtroom clash left you inspired, don't let the conversation stop here. Subscribe to our channel to catch every unfolding story of courage, resilience, and truth in the political arena. Share this video with friends, family, and colleagues to spread awareness about the power of principled action. Engage with us in the comments. Tell us what moments of integrity and courage inspire you, and join a community committed to learning. Reflection and positive change. Every view, every share, every discussion amplifies the lesson. Integrity and intelligence can confront even the most intimidating forces. Let Crockett's example serve as a call to action, not only to follow the news but to live it, to act with courage, and to honor principle in every decision we make. The courtroom showed us what's possible. Now it's up to us to carry that lesson forward.